What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you all of the announcement highlights from the Game Awards, or more specifically, the big announcements that I was particularly interested in, as despite claims of it being somewhat short, it was still like 3 hours, and as usual, it came along with many announcements, world premieres, etc., so I figured I'd boil that down for people, talk about the stuff I was interested in and likely will be covering on the channel as well. So, first and foremost, Baldur's Gate 3, big game for the channel, exactly my genre. And the news here wasn't mind-blowing because we know we're going to get more information on the 14th when they do their panel from hell. However, we did get a new trailer as well as a release window. They are officially shooting for August 2023, which is more or less what we expected. And if they manage to keep that date, that will put it at roughly 3 years in early access. And they also announced that Misc will be involved somehow via showing him escaping from inside a mimic, and they also showed off some new gameplay footage with a few new monsters and things like that we hadn't seen before. But for the most part, the reveal here was the date itself and the fact that Misc and Boo are going to be involved, or at least presumably Boo will be there. We didn't actually see him, and we'll kind of see what they do from there on the 14th. That brings us to the second bit of information, and this was Diablo 4. This was again primarily a release date reveal, though they did also show a release trailer as well, again with more information to follow on the 15th. They also did recently do a sort of media push where a bunch of people got to play it but not record it, and could talk about it using pre-recorded footage that the studio made. So personally, I'm holding off on judgment for this one until I see more in-the-moment stuff from people, probably around the time the beta opens up, because apparently it's getting an open beta at some point. But the big thing here was the release date announcement, which is June 6th, 2023. And then we have Final Fantasy 16, also releasing next year sometime. For the most part, it's what you would expect from a Final Fantasy game. However, they did seem to give this one a bit of a darker tone, which would fall in line with some of the media reports that we've seen here and there about it being more filled with controversial subject matter, let's say, which is an interesting route for a Final Fantasy game. And as somebody who's played literally all of them, curious to see how that pans out. But it is kind of cool to get some info about it. But for the most part, it's pretty much what you'd expect from Final Fantasy at this point. But moving on from there, we have Judas from one of the makers of BioShock, and this looks to be a spiritual successor to BioShock. This basically just looked like BioShock in space to me, which, while certainly not a bad thing, we really don't know too much about this game beyond that. They showed a tiny bit of gameplay, and it, again, just looked like BioShock, so gonna have to wait for more information on this one, really. They also announced Hades 2, the follow-up to smash hit indie title Hades, and we should be getting early access to this one in early 2023. And I mention this one specifically because I like ARPGs and people have been asking me to check out Hades forever, for content I should say. And it looks like this will finally give me an excuse to do so, though that said, early 2023 is packed, so we will see what happens. We also got some more gameplay for Atomic Heart. This is releasing on February 20th, which we already knew, but we got to see some more gameplay. But we've already seen a good bit of this game via gameplay, etc. And it's shaping up to be a pretty interesting action combat adventure. So it was nice to see it, though really we won't have to wait too much longer to check this game out for ourselves. Again, February 20th. Then we saw more of Star Wars Jedi Survivor. This got a confirmed March release date, along with some gameplay and a look at Cal Kestis, who finally seems to have stepped into his role as a Jedi Knight, which I think will be interesting from a power curve standpoint, because presumably we'll start this one already better off in terms of our powers, as opposed to having to sort of relearn them as part of Fallen Order. So I'm curious what some of the more advanced force powers that are going to be available actually are. But Fallen Order was a fun game. I've actually reviewed that one previously, so I'm looking forward to the second one here. I'd be lying if I said it was one of my most anticipated games, but I am looking forward to it. And then we had an interesting announcement with Lords of the Fallen, which is a Souls-like from 2016 that I remember got some mixed reviews, as I recall, which is apparently being rebooted, while also kind of expanding it as well. Apparently it's like 5 times bigger than the original release. And what they showed of it here looked pretty good. Though I think it's really interesting to reboot a series that's barely 6 years old. Just kind of an odd note that I wanted to mention, pretty much just because of that, actually. And speaking of Souls-likes, Elden Ring, as I'm sure many people already know, won Game of the Year, which makes the announcement of Armored Core 6 from Software that much more interesting, as this is apparently their next title And while we don't really have any more information than that, it's going to involve a bunch of fighting robots, and a lot of people have their eyes on what From Software does next, thanks to their win as well. So I would imagine you'll be hearing about this one quite a bit, as it is apparently going to be releasing next year as well. Now, while I considered those things to be the most interesting to me personally, there were also a variety of smaller announcements, such as Remnant 2, a first-person magic shooter, Immortals. We got a little more information about the upcoming game Nightingale, which is a sort of crafting survival game. We got some DLC announcements, a couple of smaller sort of indie games really, in the form of a Hellboy title, a game called Post Trauma, as well as a little bit of gameplay from the upcoming Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. And then last but not least, an interesting title called Banishers. The trailer for this one really got me. There was a little bit of gameplay, and in some ways it kind of looks like it's just going to be an action adventure where you're fighting a lot of spirits and ghosts. But the mood of the trailer on this one really drew me in, and I'll definitely be keeping an eye on it. But that is pretty much everything interesting from the Game Awards, I would say. I'll try to post links to all the various trailers and stuff like that down below if you want to go check out any of this stuff for yourself. As if you're anything like myself, I don't really care much for the show itself. I do, however, tune in to see all these world premieres and announcements that always get bundled in, so hopefully I've spared you some trouble of having to dig in for that stuff yourself. And I certainly hope you enjoyed the video. So, like, comment, subscribe if you did. Let me know in the comment section down below if there was anything interesting that you saw or want to talk about, as I am all ears. But regardless of all that, truly, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.